Artie, I am here with an enterprise mobile security expert, I would say.
That's what they call me.
Yeah, all right. And so could you tell me a little bit about who you are and what you do?
Yeah. So I'm Dave Field, and I work at Enterprise Mobile. And Enterprise Mobile provides services to enterprises that are deploying Windows mobile devices. And I work in our architecture team, and I'm our device management and security architect. Previous to Enterprise Mobile, I worked at Microsoft for 10 years on the Windows Mobile team for the last 3 years as a security PM.
Okay, yeah, that's cool. So, you know, in terms of locking things down with mobile phones, I mean, I think a lot of times people just think about, you know, I'm going to make it so that they have to have a PIN, and I'm going to make it so I can remote wipe it, and I'm good, right?
Right.
Is that a valid kind of mentality, or what else is there to it, right?
Well, those are really valid features that are necessary to lock down a device. However, a lot of times that's not where it ends. So underneath those features, you really need to lock down the platform, because you can have, for instance, untrusted applications that can actually disable those features so that they don't work at the times when you most need them to work.
Okay. I mean, so can people, you know, what ways can people kind of work around some of those mechanisms to get into the phone?
Sure. So an example would be on a phone that's not locked down. If you're trying to enforce, say, a device lock on the device, that's really just a registry setting. And so I can actually create an application that will be notified when that registry setting is flipped to enforce device lock, and then I can change it back. So I can actually just quickly change it back whenever it gets into the enforced position. Of course, that's going to be an untrusted application, and so I have to guard against those.
Okay. Okay. So is there a good place that you could recommend or point people for making sure they have all those settings locked down?
Yeah, actually, there's a couple of good papers on the Microsoft site, I believe, on TechNet. And I myself have written a white paper too, which is on the Enterprise Mobile website, that actually describes all the settings you need to use and how to implement them in tools like Mobile Device Manager from Microsoft.
Okay, all right. Obviously, there's a lot of different tools out there to do mobile device, you know, security, right?
Mm-hmm.
You got Mobile Device Manager, an Exchange now 2010 having some additional functionality there. Mm-hmm. Where would you say that our solutions, right, Microsoft solutions for mobile management are strong? What are our strong points against a lot of the competition?
Sure. One of the biggest advantages of Microsoft tools is that the client side of the code is actually built into the operating systems, and that's really important for mobile device management, because you need to do what's called bootstrapping of the device to the management system. And typically with a third-party application, that requires installation of the client application on the device. So you end up having this kind of chicken and an egg situation where you want to bring the device under management, but you can't do that until you install an application. But typically you install applications by using mobile device management. Mm-hmm. With Microsoft solutions, it's all there in the operating system already, and so you don't need to go through the installation process. Okay,
all right. And what areas would you say, you know, if people are looking at these things, what are some major areas you'd say that we don't have those capabilities now, where they need to look to third-party solutions for?
Right. So some customers really have some hardcore security requirements. You know, I think about, you know, government, military, those that need to follow security regulatory body standards such as HIPAA or Sarbanes-Oxley, and they really have some pretty big security requirements. They'll turn to some of these third-party applications that really go the extra mile. You know, obviously they're going to pay a little extra for that, but I think that's one reason. Another reason is for companies that have very specific requirements and need very specific features from their device management solution, such as, for instance, being able to create a whitelist of available applications on the device. You may overlay the whole UI of the device with just one or two applications that you want to allow users to be able to access. that's an example of something that's not built into the Microsoft solutions. And these companies typically have, a very clear return on investment for their mobile device deployment, and so they can afford to actually go out and purchase these third-party solutions.
Okay. So one of the other things, is kind of bigger today, right? Is having like multiple forms of authentication, right? Obviously,
Right.
different layers of security. The phone obviously presents somewhat of a challenge as opposed to your regular desktop machines for two-factor authentication.
Right.
You can't quite, just stick a smart card into your phone. So, what are some ways that you'd recommend to people to start implementing the two-factor form authentication on their phones?
Right. So the typical reaction to, for instance, IT security people looking at, a mobile device deployment is to say, well, this is kind of like remote access from our PCs, and we want to be able to treat it the same way. And so we require two-factor authentication for all remotely accessing PCs, and we want mobile devices to actually meet the same requirement. The problem is that the way that you use a mobile device is very different than the way you might use a PC. With a PC, you sit down for 30 minutes of email, so you log onto your VPN, you do your 30 minutes of email, and then you log off. But with mobile devices, you typically are getting little information bites. You're late for your meeting, you get out of your car. Where was that conference room again? It may have changed 5 minutes ago. You want to just get that device out of your pocket, see where that conference room is, and put it right back in. You don't have time to do a bunch of authentication. So because of that, you have sort of a conflict between security requirements and usability on the device. So you have to really be innovative around how are you going to meet the security requirements while meeting the usability requirements. As far as how you can do that on a mobile device, the way that I'm looking at right now and I've researched is being able to use what we call soft cert two-factor authentication. And so with that, what you do is you enroll a user identity certificate onto the device, so it's resident in memory. You implement what's called installation and execution security on the device. You implement device lock and device wipe on the device. And then what you have is a mobile device that is actually approaching the same type of functionality that you get from a smart card. You're entering in a PIN, which is something that you know, and you have the device with a cert on it, which is something that you have. And so you're actually using that device as your smart card in that instance. That also allows you to be able to use synchronizing solutions such as Exchange ActiveSync that needs to be able to sync even when the device is in your pocket and you're not, looking at the UI so that you know to enter a PIN every time it tries to connect.
Okay. And is that something that can be done just native with Microsoft technology, or is there something people need to get to make that happen?
Yeah, for the soft cert two-factor authentication solution, you don't need anything extra from third-party software or anything. It's all built into the Microsoft platforms, and you can implement it just using what's there.
Okay, great. So do you have, kind of last question here is, do you have any kind of just general basic guidelines you'd recommend for people with security and mobile phones as a last call to action for people? Yeah,
so a lot of what people are doing with security really comes down to configuration. So you've heard of the term secure by default. Well, a lot of times with mobile devices, not all the settings are secure by default, and that's because a lot of the devices are used for by consumers, not necessarily by enterprises. So when these devices come under management by an enterprise, they need to have security configured. However, once you configure that security, you need to enforce it properly. And that's actually where a lot of bad things can happen. So you need to guard against the installation and execution of untrusted applications to be able to make sure that those applications can't change those settings back to an unsecure state.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you very much for your time.
All right. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Yeah.
All right.
All right.